This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, welcome to session 4 of the National System for Incident Reporting for Radiation Treatment. My name is Spencer Ross and I'll be your presenter today. I work at the Canadian Institute for Health Information, and CIHI was the organization that developed the system in collaboration with the Canadian Partnership for Quality in Radiotherapy. And today I'll be talking a bit about the development of the system. First of all, the importance for a pan-Canadian incident reporting system, what is ENSER-RT and who is using it, how the system works, functionality, including some discussion around batch uploads and the analytical tools. And finally, we'll talk a bit about privacy and confidentiality. And then the last piece will be a bit of a demonstration about how to enter records if you're using the online incident capture tool, and then also how to use the analytical tools. So we'll jump right in. So about CIHI, our mandate is to deliver comparable and actionable information to accelerate improvements in healthcare, health system performance, and population health across the continuum of care. ENSER-RT's purpose and objectives. Well, why create a national system for incident reporting? Ultimately, everybody experiences incidents within their own program, and a lot of these incidents have some common roots, and shared learning was really the impetus for having discussions about incident reporting on a national level, so that we can share our experiences and hopefully learn from them, ultimately to improve patient safety. When we share our incidents together, we build capacity by giving those at the front line the tools, access, and knowledge to help improve things at the local level. But also, not written here, but also to have a national look at these things and try to spread ideas that can be developed or looked at a national level, and give everybody access to those ideas as well. How is this achieved? First of all, it was through standardization of the information that was collected, and I'll talk a bit about the process of how that standardization evolved. Create a system with flexible options for data submission. We'll talk a bit about that shortly. Enable access to the data. It's not good enough to provide into a black hole, but to give everybody access to that data to do their own work and explore their own issues. And to give an analytical tool to do that work, to extract the information that's relevant at the local level. So a bit about the timeline. In 2004, CIHI began working on a medication incident reporting system, and we developed, through national collaboration, a data standard and the functionality that was going to be built into the reporting system. We piloted it starting in 2008 and launched in 2010. Ontario actually decided to pick up ENSER for medications for critical incident reporting, and requires the Ontario Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care require hospitals to submit those with severe and death incidents to ENSER. We shortly thereafter developed the ability to batch upload medication incidents. And shortly after that, in 2014, we began to have discussions with CPQR, Canadian Partnership for Quality in Radiotherapy, about ENSER-RT. And in 2014, there was a Delphi meeting to develop the ENSER-RT taxonomy, really a meeting of minds from those across the country who were experts in radiation treatment, to discuss what was relevant, what was important, and how to move forward with that. We developed a system that built in that work that came out of the Delphi meeting, and we initiated a pilot phase in 2015. And in July of last year, we launched ENSER-RT with a revised ENSER-RT taxonomy based on feedback that was given during the pilot phase. And there was a radiation treatment incident investigation course that was launched in 2018, and not on this slide, but work that we're doing as we speak. We're testing the ability to batch upload RT data into the system for those with vendor software systems, particularly jurisdictions are in a position to do that. The ENSER-RT development. So I talked a bit about some of the Delphi process. The data standard was developed, really led by CPQR, because they're the experts out there, in consultation with the larger community. And the system development was based on, as I said, the medication incident reporting system and additional CPQR requirements. The pilot phase through 2015 and 16, there were 19 RT centers that signed on to participate. Plus, BC actually implemented the NSER-RT data standard at that time into their provincial reporting system, which is the BC Patient Safety Learning System, or PSLS. And there was pilot participation from all centers at that time, and they were able to provide some feedback into the evaluation. As I said on that earlier timeline slide, we launched in 2017. We launched with changes to the data standard based on feedback. There was some relabeling that was required. Certain terms that were misunderstood or didn't seem to make sense on face were changed, such as reportable circumstance was changed to a label called programmatic hazard. There were also some additions and deletions of values or data elements. We added, for example, breast to the body regions. I'm not sure why that one was left off, but it was. And this is why we do a pilot, because people provide feedback and let us know where things are missing or there are gaps. And then there were some more larger scale redevelopment of select data elements, and really critical data elements received a lot of feedback, and those were problem, process, and to a lesser extent contributing factors. And those have been built into the changes that were launched in July 2017. There are actually some remaining changes that we're going to be introducing a little bit later this year. And they are more relabeling issues and the addition or deletion of a value or two within select data elements. But they are much more contained changes compared to the problem, process, and contributing factor changes that were implemented. And as I said, we're actually working right now on the implementation of FHIR, F-H-I-R, or Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources to improve batch transfer of data. And we hope to work with our partners in BC, the PSLS group, to be able to launch that soon. So some of the features of the system, it's a web-based application, so no software to upload, etc. There's flexible data capture, and I'll show you the single data entry process, but also, as I just discussed, there will be the ability to capture multiple records through batch upload. And I'll speak a little bit about that more in terms of what that involves. There's also an analytical tool with some flexible templates to create summary reports and comparison reports. And finally, there's a communication tool. It's kind of like an email. It's built into the system. It's private. It's non-identifying, and it allows discussions with with participating facilities and users. So the batch upload, or batch data capture will enable a local vendor systems or systems that are used at the jurisdiction level to connect to NSER-RT and upload incident data. There is a bit of a process. We build the ability to actually accept data, but in terms of being able to accept that data, local systems need to either adopt the NSER-RT data standard or map the local taxonomy to the NSER-RT data standard. So there's a bit of change possibly required there. Some local systems do not have any radiation treatment specific standard built in, so it's an opportunity to use the standard and develop that. Once the mapping occurs, we resolve any data gaps, and then there's this final line, the implement system specifications. Really, it's a creation of an extraction routine within the local system to be able to take the data out of the system and then make it ready and following the specifications of the NSER-RT data standard for transfer to CIHI. And because of we're adopting FHIR, it's a system-to-system communication once it's established, as opposed to requiring a human to actually interact and initiate a data transfer. The systems speak to each other. So we've actually implemented a form of batch with medication incidents in BC. We're hoping to use the FHIR resource or the FHIR standard to be able to do that with EnserRT, and looking forward to working on that this fall. We also have, there's a sales software that integrated the EnserRT minimum data set, and that's being used in Montreal and in Ottawa, and there's a possibility of working on a batch transfer with that group too. What is the value of submitting incident data to EnserRT? And this is an important question to ask. You know, if you have your own system and you're working with your local data there, what additional value do you get from providing data to a national reporting system? Well, we give you access to your own data with the analytical tool that we have, and I'll show you that. Also, you can do aggregate analysis of the entire data set, not just your own data within there. You can look at things by severity and problem process, any of the data elements that exist. And that helps to look at trends over time, both your own trends, but also the trends from the national data. And that's important. You can learn about rare events. If you're looking for data on a particular problem, you can compare that with your own local experience. And you can learn from others, because there is an opportunity for people to tell their story within the description and to tell their resolution and how they resolve their problems, not just the aggregate data, but the descriptive data as well. And that becomes very beneficial when you're trying to resolve an issue at your own center. And it contributes to a repository that serves to benefit all, not just your own, but the national look at things. And the CPQR is developing a process for doing systematic analysis of the data and putting that back out in e-bulletins for the community of users. And that this is one of the added values to contributing your data to the system. I've hinted a bit at who has access to the NCR data. Certainly the data providers do. We're also, we help analyze the data here at CIHI based on direction from the folks at CPQR and the steering committee there to feed back into those e-bulletins. So there's that process there. We're also having discussions with local groups. So in Ontario, there's what's called the Risk Committee, and the centers that provide radiation treatment in Ontario meet on a regular basis to review their own incidents that have come up, and they're using EnserRT to assist in that work, and they identify trends. So Cancer Care Ontario helps coordinate that, and so they have access to the data to be able to look at it to help that risk group. So we have some customizable views that allow for multiple reporting requirements to be met with a single report. So submitting that report in allows not just yourself to look at it, but if you're in Ontario, to be able to use it for Cancer Care Ontario and the CPQR to use that report in aggregate analysis to assist in national review of incidents. So these are important ways that you catapult a single incident into multiple uses and assisting in multiple efforts. There's customizable groups for analysis. So some users may not need facility identifiable data, but require information for a region or a health zone or some other level of geography, provincial. And this is how we can develop that and work with those users. Currently, we have not made the incident data available for third-party data requests, but that doesn't mean we aren't actively looking at how that can be vetted. And the advisory committee for EnserRT is set up with processes to evaluate requests as they come in. So the AnswerRT data privacy, a little bit about that. This is very important to CIHI. We run a number of databases, and we have privacy impact assessments that are done on each of our databases to make sure that we're attending to this issue very carefully under a set of policies that we have developed. And we have recently launched the Answer Privacy Impact assessment that's updated to include AnswerRT, and it's been posted on our website. Just a little bit about some of the things we think about. Right now, the AnswerRT data, there are no identifiers in any of the data we collect. There's no patient identifiers, health card or name, no healthcare provider identifiers. We certainly don't want names of, Dr. Smith or anything such as that. And the facility information is limited and protected. Of course, the information, an incident is connected to the facility that submits the data so that we can track back, and the institutions that are analyzing their own data know that it is their own data. But the access and the processes for looking at facility data is protected so that not everybody can see. If I'm sitting in a particular center and looking at aggregate data, I don't know where those other incidents have come from. So data providers have full access to their own data identifiably, and from other facilities, it's not identifiable. Importantly, CIHI is a secondary data collector, and we don't own AnswerRT data. So that we are what we call custodians of that data as opposed to owners. And that's an important distinction, and it's discussed in the PIA. There's a private communication tool, as I spoke about, and that's really only authorized participants can anonymously discuss and learn about incidents. So that's built in, and I'll show you just a little bit about that in the demonstration. So where are the participants? We have registered participants in Quebec and Ontario and in Nova Scotia, as well in New Brunswick and Alberta. Participated in the pilot, and we're negotiating with those users to continue participation through the launch. BC, we're looking at getting, as I said, the batch going there and getting them fully involved in the system. Hasn't been updated since February, but the trends remain the same. There's been steady growth since we launched the pilot in 2015, and we're encouraged by the level of participation within the system. Just a quick look at a type of incident analysis. This is a type of incident analysis and acute medical harm combined. So it ranges from what we call a programmatic hazard, where there's no patient involved, but really a situation that has been identified as probably not the best practice or a hazardous situation. And that's what those 293. And then there's situations where there's a near miss, where there is a patient involved, but somebody identified the error or the incident prior to it actually affecting the patient or reaching the patient. So maybe no treatment was administered prior to the recognition of it. And then we have where treatment it actually reaches the patient or an actual incident, and an evaluation of what harm it results from that. And most of them result in no harm, a very small number of mild, in this case, 3 moderate and 1 severe, and we've had no deaths reported to date. So just to look at some common event types, wrong anatomical site is typical, wrong patient position or treatment setup, wrong missing or damaged treatment accessory. Scheduling errors are relatively common. Hardware, software errors are recorded as well. And we've seen some stuff around falls and patient injuries or other medical conditions that are relevant. And some common contributing factors, expectation bias is always an issue with incidents, or often an issue with incidents regardless of the incident type. policies and procedures not followed. Maybe some policies and procedures were developed but inadequate to address the situation. Distractions and diversions are always an issue in busy practices. Patient family member preference or behavior can play a role, and hardware and software design possibly inadequate to deal with particular situations. We're getting to the end of this PowerPoint presentation before we come into the demonstration, but how to participate in NSER-RT. Really contact us at nsir@chi-hi.ca or contact the CPQR to ask questions. In order to participate, a service agreement between Chi-Hi and the participating facility is required. That just sets out the behaviors and the expectations, not just of the participating facility, but also what is expected of Chi-Hi in the relationship. Once you contact us and say you're interested in participating, an agreement will be sent from Chi-Hi's Central Client Services. The agreement specifies the terms of use and names the organizational contact. Once we receive the signed agreement, then Central Client Services provides instructions for setting up user accounts and requesting access. All user access requests are validated by the organizational contact, so that's really just a validation loop, so that any requests aren't just granted access. There is that loop back to the center. And we provide supporting documents and site setup tips and etc. Any of the instructions you need to get yourself going, and other documentation such as the minimum data set documentation. And we can also and are happy to provide a demonstration of the system and any privacy documentation that you require. And that's the end of the slideshow. I'm going to hopefully switch quickly over to the demonstration. Okay. So what you're seeing here is what the initial screen you see after you log in. I'm not going to demonstrate the login process. That's pretty standard. This is the first screen. It really is a list of messages that one might receive as a result of being a participant. The participant that I'm using for demonstration today is really a practice account or a dummy account that we have in the production system for us to be able to test to make sure things work well. And because of that, there are certain things that I won't be able to demonstrate. I won't be able to demonstrate a full submission. I will get right to the very end and leave it in a draft form, because we don't want to submit that into the real database because it's not a real incident. And also this message board is a little bit false too. There's a lot of messages in there telling us that there's incidents that have reached what we call our 30-day draft notification period. And what this does is say, you've had an incident for 30 days since you first created it. Do you want to finish it off and submit it to Chi-Hi? Since we never finished the submission on that, that's why you see all of these 30-day draft incident notifications here. But other message types you might see here, if we see a patient name or some other identifier in a text field, and just to let you know, we look at every text field that comes in to review for identifiers. If we notice an identifier, we actually send a notice to you, and you'll see it in your folder here that says there's been an identifier. Please go in and modify the description to remove the identifier. That's the type of message you would see. You might also see a message from some other participant who saw an incident that you submitted that they're interested in learning more about. And I'll show you how that works once we get into the system. So let me go through the submit process. And you can see I clicked on the Submit tab, and I'm clicking on the link that says Enter New Radiation Therapy Incident. And once we get into the process, there'll be a series of screens. You can see the first one is highlighted, which is Source, and there will be Impact, Discovery, Patient Details, Delivery, and Investigation. And basically, these are groups of information that are kind of related to each other. and they represent pages within the system. The source really is the institution you're from. Some institutions have some off-site or related centers, and so there may be more than one listed here. But in this particular practice one, we just have the single, what we call source facility. The case record number is a local identifier, a local incident identifier that you may want to cross-reference to. It is in no case should it be a patient identifier of any kind, but it could be an incident identifier to a local system that you're using. And it is optional. So once I've completed the page, I move on to the next one, and you can see that I now have 2 pages highlighted here. I'm at the impact page. These little red asterisks here indicate that these are mandatory fields to fill out. So I'm just going to type away here. I type out the story that's relevant for this incident and take a quick review. No identifiers in it. I move on to the next data element. And this asks, and this will change. These are one of the label changes that we're going to be looking at. Is this a reportable circumstance? It will change to programmatic hazardous term. But in this, it's still using the old term at this point in time. So is this a reportable circumstance? And if I say, yes, it is, I've completed the page and I go on to next. If I say, no, this isn't a reportable circumstance, then it asks me the question, well, did it reach the patient? Did this incident reach the patient? And if I say no, essentially I'm saying this is a near miss. It was involved a patient, but it didn't reach the patient. But if I say yes, then it says, okay, if it reached the patient, what was the level of harm? If it reached the patient, what was the dosimetric impact? And because it caused, because there was a dosimetric impact, is there likely to be additional latent harm? And I can answer that question. So these are all defined within our minimum data set documentation, and these are all the terms that were developed and vetted by the CPQR and through the Delphi process developed and defined. And when you're using the system, you can actually click on these question marks to remind yourself how to code these. And these are coding values and a little bit of guide for use as you're looking at each of the data elements. So once you've completed a page, you move to the next one. And this one is the discovery set of data elements. And they're pretty self-explanatory. Ward and unit, these are locally established, and there's a process for doing that we'll provide a demonstration to should you join. And you select the ones that are relevant. And then dates and times are pretty self-explanatory. And you can either put a precise time or a time period. Occurred date is not required. You can absolutely put that in, and we encourage you to fill in optional data elements, but it isn't a required data element. As similarly, healthcare providers or others who detected the incident, who were involved in the incident, not required, but very helpful when analyzing data. And you can fill that out. These are multiple select data elements, and you can select obviously more than one for that. So there's the list once you've selected them. If you want to change them, all you need to do is reopen that, and you can change the selections you made. And I've gone from 3 down to 2 through that change. And the same list comes up for who were involved in the incident. Once I'm happy with my selections, I move to the next page. On this page, this is the little bit of data that is collected on patients. So the month of the month of birth and the year of birth. And once you fill in those, there's a bit of validation that says how old that patient is. Patient gender and diagnosis relevant to treatment are the only pieces that are mandatory here. And I'm not pausing to show you what the selections are in there. These are all listed in the minimum data set document and really require more time if you're trying to evaluate whether this is representative in your own idea what should be here and shouldn't be here. I encourage you to look at the minimum data set document to to look at that in more detail. And we move to the next page. And here's where some of the details around the incident are really documented here. What was the process where the incident occurred? What was the process where the incident was detected? And I'm selecting things at random. They may seem awkward because of that. The problem type, and there's a list here that you can see. It's quite a involved list, but this is a single select data element. Every time if you change your selection, it deletes the initial selection you made. So that's how that works. And then once I'm happy with my selection, I press OK and it populates the field. Contributing factors, very similar, but multi-select. And the number of patients affected. Because, especially if it's a system setup issue, it could be related, it could be a standard setup that's affecting multiple patients. The incident itself relates to the effect on a single patient, but you can also indicate that this particular incident that I'm telling you about and how it affected this patient did affect more than one patient. So it's a bit of a nod to the fact that things can affect more than one person. Once you're happy with that page, you move to the next, and treatment techniques, and you select, it's a multiple select here. Total dose is text field. You just type in the things that are the details that are relevant. Number of fractions delivered incorrectly as well. Number of fractions prescribed. So that's, again, they're mandatory. You see the red asterisks, but you can also, they're text fields. Hardware and software involved are not mandatory, and they're not always relevant, especially if it's not focused on a hardware or a software issue. So you can fill those out, text in the manufacturer and the model number, similar for the software. Body regions treated, a multiple select. See the list there. And then the treatment intent, optional data element, curative, palliative, or unknown. And then we move to the next and final page, where there's ameliorating actions. So what were some of the things that were done to alleviate the issue with the patient or after the fact? So medical management and radiation treatment plan revised. These are multi-select data elements, so all that apply. What were the safety barriers that identified the incident, or sorry, failed to identify the incident because it did reach the patient? Where did things, which things are particularly relevant that could have been in place or should have been in place to help you identify this? And you can select the ones that are relevant. Again, all of these data elements are defined, and for a quick reference, you can go behind the question mark. And then optionally, you can actions taken or planned to reduce risk. There's a list of things here that can be selected. So I've reached the end of the data entry here, and I can save the record. And it's saved as a draft at this point in time. And if I wasn't a fake institution or a fake facility here, I could go on to submit this record, or I can view the whole thing. And I will click on that, and you can see the whole thing right here. All of the data that I've just entered is all listed here. Oops. And I can go back and I can edit it, and it would open up the exact process that I did. But in this case, everything is viewable to me, and I can jump ahead to any of the pages and make changes to edit it, and then save the record, save any of the changes, and go back to where I was. It's still in draft. Or from here, if I'm entering 3 or 4 at a time, I can enter the next incident, leave this as draft. So those are the options once you get to the end of this. And that allows you some flexibility in your work process. So that's the end of it, of capturing an individual record or entering it into the system. I'm going to quickly show you some work in behind the Analyze tab. What I'm not going to show you is the Administer tab. This really is just setting up wards and units when you start or when your facility first joins. And I can work through that on a demonstration, and we have some instructions that we can send people. But for today's demonstration, I'll focus on entering and analyzing. So you click on the Analyze tab and click on the Analyze link, and it opens up what we call our Business Intelligence Tool or MicroStrategy. And I'm going to quickly move through to where one makes some selections. So this particular user has access to both medication and radiation treatment. Again, for our test purposes, you'll probably only see radiation treatment. You won't see these three types of reports, but you'll see RT aggregate reports and RT specialized reports. I'm going to focus today on RT aggregate reports. And you can do a multivariable report or a single variable report. I'm going to start with single because it's the simplest demonstration to start with. And really, once you get here, it's a wizard pick list. You pick from the things that are required, and there are three things. You can see here on the left-hand side, there's 1, 2, 3 that are identified as required. There's a flag in this third one, which actually means that there's a default selection already made. So in a sense, actually, there's only two things that are required to create a report. I'm going to start with a very simple report by saying type of RT incident. And then I'm going to pick, I want to show the type of RT incident. I'm going to use all answer data. So that's by everybody that submitted records to date. And here's the one that was defaultly selected. I'm just going to get a count, a frequency of all those records. The things that I'm not going to make selections on today are filtering by dates, either the detected date or the submitted, or the occurred date or the submitted date. I'm not going to make any of those selections. I'm also not going to filter on any of the other data elements. I could, for example, quickly filter on gender, and then a second page would pop up and I can filter on female. And all I want to do is get a type of RT incident and for female only. But I'm not going to show that, just so that I can quickly generate a report. By making two selections, I've generated a report. And really, if I hadn't been talking, I probably could have done that in about 5 seconds. That's how easy it is to do a report and to get data. So to date, there's been 2,668 records submitted to NSER that are available for analysis. From this point, I may have some further questions. I may say, oh, I'm interested in actually looking at some of these actual incidents. And from here, I can do what's called a drill. And I can drill and look at all of these records in an anonymous view. So all of those actual incidents that I see in this report can pop up. But if I'm sitting in a center that submitted data, I could say, oh, I'm interested to know which one of those are mine. And I can actually look at case listing HCF view. And what happens is I get a listing of records that I submitted from this particular report. I'm going to click on this one, again, because this is a fake hospital that I'm using, or a fake facility that I'm using, and there really is no submitted data for it. So the HCF view would return no data. The anonymous view does show me data. And what it shows me here is a quick listing of all the records that are in the system, all the actual incidents that are in the system. And it gives me a little bit of information about each one. Detected date, overall severity, a process step where it occurred, where it was detected, the primary problem type, the contributing factors, and a quick description, or the description is listed here as well. And so that sort of gives me an overall view of what's going on with each of these that I've drilled down onto. If I want a very particular view or a complete set, I can actually click on this link here, and it brings up the details, all the details that have been submitted for that particular incident. And I'm just scrolling through them to show you that there's all the details here. and I'll go back up to the top. So at this point, one of the things that I want to point out is if I've done a report and I've drilled and I've identified an incident that is particularly interesting to me, I may be actually interested in discussing this further with the organization that submitted this. And in order to do that, I can send a message to them. And I'll click on this and I'll show you what that looks like. So I can compose a message and say, I am interested in learning more about this, that, and the other thing. And I can click send the message and it will go to that organization. I don't know which organization that is going to. It's not going to, Edmonton or to BC somewhere, or it isn't unidentified to me. I have no idea where that's going. I know it's going to arrive to the person or to the organization that submitted it, and they're going to have an opportunity to see this message come up in their message board. Also, when it goes to them, they will receive a similarly crypted pseudonym for my organization when I send it. So I won't be labeled as coming from a particular facility as well. So again, that anonymity, sort of that veil is dropped in front of this, and we can have that discussion without saying who we are. So, but I'm not going to send this message, again, because I'm playing in the real system and I don't want to send somebody this message. Let me go back to where we left off in analysis, and I'm going to run one more analysis for you. I'm going to back up to where I started, and I'm going to run a multivariable analysis quickly to show you that. So I'm going to pick I'm going to go down here and I'm going to pick problem type, and I'm going to pick run it by type of RT incident. For all answer, I'm going to make no further selections, and I'm going to get a report. And you can see that there's all my problem types, and there's the type of RT incident. So it's really a matrix showing me a listing of all of this. And now I can actually, I can sort these in a way that makes sense to me, and I can see things from largest to smallest and how things have been reported, or smallest to largest, however is important. And this is a way of being able to digest the data in a useful fashion. And I can also, as I did before, I can drill on any of these rows and do an anonymous or an HCF view on these. So one of the other things, that, and I'm just wrapping up here, getting to the end, you can see, sorry about that. One of the last things that I wanted to show you is some of the utilities that come with MicroStrategy, and that you can print records, you can export records, you can create a PDF of records, and you can also graph things as well. So there's some functionality that's built into the system. You can also save things to your reports if you want to save this for later, or even save the selections that you made to run this in a month or in 6 months, or you want to run it quarterly, etc. You can save your selections and go back into the section called My Reports and retrieve that and rerun these things. Again, I'll save all of that for a demonstration. Really, for today's purposes, is to give you an introduction of some of the ability and depth that this might have should you be interested in learning more. And with that, I think I have come to the conclusion of the presentation. Thank you very much for joining me today.